NHL training camps opened across the country last week as hockey season is on the horizon, and there's many intriguing storylines surrounding the top players and teams across the league. So let's discuss them with a fantastic hockey writer and on-air host. The one and only Diandra Loux joins me now from Tampa, Florida. Diandra, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
No, glad to have you. Always good to talk some hockey with you. And I'm going to start off by talking about the defending champs, the Florida Panthers. They are entering the season as the reigning champions. What's their mood in camp, and how are they preparing to defend their title amidst high expectations as they try to go back-to-back?
Yeah, well, listen, I think, and this is coming from somebody that's in Tampa. I watched the Lightning win back-to-back cups, so have an idea of what it takes. And the Panthers had such an incredible season, such an incredible team, and what comes with winning the Stanley Cup and all the goodness of it, is that you have a really short off season, right? And then you kind of have that Stanley Cup hangover that everyone expects you to have. Also comes with a lot of wear and tear. I think at the end of the season, the Panthers were in pretty good shape. And based off what Paul Maurice has said, in the past few days as training camp kind of got going, is the guys that they have that won that cup that are still with the team are in better shape this season than they were last year at this time. So it's looking like they're, in pretty good shape. I think we'll kind of see as the season gets going. And, another thing, an unfortunate reality that comes with winning the cup is the turnover. With the salary cap, the way that it is in the NHL, you don't get to keep all your guys. So it makes it really difficult to win back-to-back Stanley Cups. And like I said, we did see the Lightning do it a few years ago, but, we watched Colorado struggle with it, and then Vegas. So, but, the Panthers have a good core and they're tough. Those guys are so gritty. And, I'm excited to see kind of what they do this season.
Yeah, excited to see it too. We know it's definitely tough to go back-to-back in any sport. Definitely tough to do that in the NHL. I want to talk to you about Connor McDavid because he's been the best player in the league for quite some time now, but the Stanley Cup has eluded him, and we know this. He was one win away from a title last season. What are the Oilers doing differently this training camp to position themselves, as genuine contenders here to actually get that Stanley Cup?
Yeah, and I think you and I spoke right after Game 7. I think it was the morning after Game 7. And, Connor McDavid is such an incredible player. Like, I can't even talk about that enough. He will win a Stanley Cup. And I think, the Oilers are kind of in that opposite position as where the Panthers are, right? Because they got so close. They made it to a Game 7 of a Stanley Cup final, and they could taste it. They knew it was there. The cup was in the building. And, they just couldn't make it happen. So I think with them, to me, they're one of my favorites to watch this season because they know what it takes now. You don't really know until you get there. Like the Panthers made a run. They made it to the final the year before. And now the Oilers are kind of in the same position. They didn't have a ton of turnover. They kind of have kept the same group there. And so they can take a look and say, where did things fall off? I think when you're playing a team like the Panthers, it does make it difficult. They're going to need, everything to go their way. And that's what it takes to win the Stanley Cup. We're going to look at, Connor McDavid and Draisaitl, and both of them, I'd expect them to have some huge seasons. But Connor McDavid is so fun to watch, and I think they got so close. And I also think that the fact that there's so many questions, are they going to get swept? They're going to get knocked out, and they started to push back, and they really shut the Panthers down there for a couple games. So that does give them some hope, going into this new season.
Yeah, that fight that they had after being down 3-0, coming back, forcing the Game 7, tremendous. You're right. We did talk after that Game 7 victory by the Panthers. Yeah, we'll see if the Oilers can get all the way back and win the whole thing this year. Also want to talk to you about Alex Ovechkin because I love talking about records, right? They always say records are meant to be broken, and Ovechkin is closing in on Wayne Gretzky's all-time regular season's goal record. Do you think his pursuit of this milestone will affect the Capitals this season, and what can fans expect from Ovechkin this season as he tries to break this record, which I'm sure yourself and other hockey fans want to see?
Yeah, no, anytime a player can break Wayne Gretzky's record, it's a a good time, but in a huge accomplishment. But we saw the Caps, make a push there for the playoffs. They got in last minute and they kind of struggled the past few years. So Alex Ovechkin has kind of been their steady piece to their game. He'll have to hit 43 goals is the number that he's going to need to beat Wayne Gretzky's record. And he does have 2 years left on his contract. We know he's kind of hitting that tail end of his career, but he can absolutely break the record. I think last season he kind of started out slow and then, really got down to it at the second half of the season. It looks like he's been on his workouts here in the off season and trying to get in good shape. So I think, if all goes well the way that he would like, and granted, no injuries happen, I think he can absolutely beat that record. And like we were saying, if you love the game of hockey, you want to see Wayne Gretzky's record be beat. It's a pretty cool accomplishment.
Yeah, anytime your name is up there with Gretzky, you've done something really, really good. And he has a chance to break one of his records that some people thought we wouldn't see fall. Now, let's also talk about a team that you've covered very closely in Tampa Bay. We were just talking about Tampa Bay before we started recording. That would be the Lightning. Now we know Steven Stamkos no longer with the team. That was shocking to many people. So how are the Lightning adjusting their strategy and team dynamics during training camp without their former leader?
Yeah, well, it really was a shock. It was a shock to us that we're covering it. It was a shock to the players. And we finally got to hear from them for the first time in media day last week since Stamkos signed with Nashville. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a weird dynamic. He played for the team for 16 years, and for a lot of them, that's the only captain that they've had. So there are pieces to their game that they're really going to have to make adjustments, and one of them being the power play. They brought in a new player, Jake Gensel. He's young, he's really elite player, and he's coming from Carolina and from Pittsburgh. And everyone that I talk to from Pittsburgh raves about what a great player he is, but you have to think of, where those holes are going to be without Steven Stamkos, not even just from a leadership standpoint, but on the ice. So the power play is a big one. And I know that they're working some different looks to kind of figure out what's going to work. But losing a guy like Stamkos is, you can't really replace him. You just kind of have to evolve and grow. And so that's what they're going to have to do. I think it's a new era in Tampa. We saw them, win the Stanley Cup, back-to-back cups, and make that run. But there's a whole new group there, a new captain in Victor Hedman. And I think he's the perfect person to kind of push this team forward.
Yeah, the Lightning are going to try to move forward here. We'll see if they're able to do that this season. All right, let's talk about a local team here in NYC, and that would be the New York Rangers, because after their loss in the conference finals last season, what are the key focus areas for the Rangers during this training camp to ensure a stronger finish than how they finished last year? What do they need to focus on?
I feel like Rangers fans are going to get really mad at me for saying this, but if I'm the Rangers, I'm taking a step back and I'm going to take a hard look at where the holes were, right? Because if there was a year that the Rangers were going to make it to the end, it was last season. They had a great team. They had a tough, gritty team. And they could not push through that door. So what is it about the Rangers that they just cannot get past that hump? And I think, playing the Panthers, obviously we talked about it earlier, but, they played a style of shutdown defense and they were shutting down the Stars with the Rangers and every team that they played. But you can't rely on the power play to get you through. The Rangers had a great power play, but that's not something that you can rely on. And I think we're going to see a lot of teams in the league look at what the Panthers did and the type of defense that they played, and they're going to start bringing that into their game as well. So I feel like in New York, the vibes are high with the Rangers. They're always high, but vibes are not going to win the Stanley Cup. And so there's a list of things that kind of need to go your way, and then they're gonna have to shift their game a little bit too. But like I said, I think the Panthers are kind of the model for that, and we'll probably see the Rangers kind of pick up pieces as well.
So Diandra, I like that quote. Vibes are not going to win you a Stanley Cup. Ranger fans should agree with that. I'm not saying they're all going to agree with that. I think they should, but you're right. They do have to tweak some things. And maybe in that series, maybe what we saw was the Panthers were just a little bit tougher when it counted, and you saw the great defense that they were able to play. So we'll see what the Rangers do in adjusting going forward. Now, we know this. Every season sees a surprise team, one or two, shake up the standings. So based on the early days of training camp and what you've kind of been seeing and following, which team do you believe could be this year's dark horse and why?
Yeah, listen, we were talking about Steven Stamkos earlier and kind of his leadership. And Nashville is one of those teams, during free agency, they stacked up with some veteran players and just some really good players in general. And I look at two guys in particular. Jonathan Marchessault from Vegas, who helped lead his team to a Stanley Cup. And then you look at Steven Stamkos, obviously we know what he's done, but he led his team to two Stanley Cup championships as well. And I see two guys in those players who, their teams decided, listen, it's time for us to move on. And that, to me, those are two guys who have a chip on their shoulder, and they're both two totally different guys. Stamkos he's going to play with some emotion. And I think he has a lot of hurt with what happened in Tampa. And then you look at Marchessault, he's a little bit more spicy, kind of ready to rock and roll. And I think that they're going to feed off of each other. But Nashville's got a great goalie. They've got a pretty stacked team. And like I said, the leadership, they have tons of leadership throughout the roster. So that is a team, that's one of those teams that I'm going to be watching to kind of make a push there in the playoffs. And like I said, once you win a Stanley Cup, they know what the recipe is and what they need to do and how it needs to happen. And they've got plenty of that on the Predators this year.
All right, keep your eye on Nashville, team to watch out for in the NHL this season. NHL season right upon us is coming up. Training camp underway. Preseason games starting. Should be very exciting. Stay tuned to Diandra Loux, one of the best when it comes to covering hockey across the National Hockey League. Diandra, always a pleasure to talk to you about what's going on the ice. We'll do it again soon.
Let's do it. That sounds good.
All right.